Hello, welcome to Bookworms. It's the show where we read a book and then talk about that book. I am your host, Alex.
And I'm Joe.
How the hell are you, Joe?
Doing good, Alex. How are you doing?
Fantastic.
You look tired. You work hard today?
You're not supposed to tell a lady that she looks tired.
No, that's something else.
Oh, okay. No, it's been a busy day, but I'm glad we're here
A busy
now.
day reading books.
Oh yeah, I've been reading up a storm lately.
You finished this book just in the nick of time, like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, I finished it yesterday. Thank you very much. Keeping it fresh in my mind.
Again, no notes I see, so your usual status quo.
Yeah, as they say in the theater world, perfect, no notes.
So yeah, today we're going to talk about the Tain, or the proper pronunciation, the Tuan.
The Twine.
Yeah, but we'll call it the Tain because, well, we're dumb Americans, so.
Yeah, this is a Irish legend, and there's a lot of Irish names and locations, and it can
We're
be
not going to
hard.
pronounce any of them correctly,
Yeah.
so don't
I
get
feel
too
like
mad
we
at us.
do a bigger disservice trying to pronounce them correctly. There's a couple I like some of the main characters. I looked up their pronunciations, so we'll do our best on those. However, just bear with us,
Yeah.
our friends from Ireland.
But yeah, so we're reading The Tain. This is a translation by Ciaran Carson. So what'd you think, Alex? Good stuff? You were excited when we were talking about this last time on this podcast.
Oh yeah, I was like super stoked when we were talking about this. I was like, oh, I love mythology. I love legends. I love just the history and the lore and the way the stories were told back then. Like it's very basic and archetypal, and it sets up all the stories that you hear nowadays. They're just the building blocks that have brought life to people. This translation is very bland, very boring, and I'm not going to be able to lead on that. It was a bear to get through.
Yeah, this is the second time this story has been translated from its original text. It's very choppy because no whole story survives. And so the translator is taking from multiple sources. It's all over the place. But what this story needs is more people to get interested, more people to want to translate it or make their own translations of it to make it more modern. But they said this is, even though this was, I believe, translated in the 90s or something. Do you remember?
I think it was late 90s, early 2000s.
2007.
2007. Okay.
But I said, so it's not, it's new, especially since the story is 2,000 to 3,000 years old, potentially, because it was orally spoken and then translated around anywhere between 700 and 1100 AD, and many times through that. As I said, it's taken from many sources. It was an oral traditional story, so we have no idea how old it actually is. But it's one of those stories that was kind of just forgotten, and only a handful of people really knew about it. They'd been translated once, I believe, in the 80s, the author said, and he wanted to take his own crack at it. So I said, maybe this podcast will get someone else interested enough to modernize it, do a Stephen Fry type version of it, like Stephen Fry did to the Greek myths, or maybe Neil Gaiman's Norse myths.
Yeah, like reading it, you definitely get ties to other like major epics and legends of long ago. Because I was catching parallels to like stories of combat that are it's like very related to Beowulf, or a lot of the wars you can relate to the the Iliad and the Odyssey, so just like super powered. One like really massive hero who's saving the day for an entire nation of people. Like you get that in a lot of these old stories because they're like the people you look up to, the people you aspire to. They're like almost call them the Jesus figure of someone you want to be, but you never can be. So you're trying to be as close to that person as you can be, and it's Cu Cullainn is a very interesting kind of character for that.
Yeah, so I'll read the description here before we get too much more into it.
Oh, please do.
The kingdoms of Connacht and Ulster are preparing to do battle with each other. Maeve, the sly and envious queen of Connacht, is on a mission to steal the fabled brown bull of Cooley from the men of Ulster. The Ulstermen, crippled by an ancient curse, face defeat from her armies until a hero emerges in the shape of the young warrior Cu Cullainn, a man of superhuman strength and supernatural powers. Through guerrilla tactics and great chariot fights, he manages to defend his province and hold off the Connacht army until Maeve tricks him, and it seems victory may come at a bitter price. Dating from the 8th century, the Tain Cooley is the oldest Irish epic, a heroic mythic tale on a par with Beowulf and Aeneid. Is that how you pronounce that, Alex?
I've actually read the Aeneid, and I still don't know how to pronounce it.
With Beowulf and the Aeneid, the sprawling saga of the legendary warrior Cu Cullainn and his battle against the invading army of Connacht. The Tain is an enthralling classic of heroism, magic, bloodshed, and betrayal, the wellspring of Irish literature from Yeats to Joyce. Yeats. The Tain is the story of the emergence of a superhuman hero, a Pean. I've never been able to pronounce that word.
I don't know that one.
Okay.
Pean. Sound off in the comments. How do you pronounce that?
To the Irish landscape of a bawdy and contentious martial farce, filled with phenomenal battle scenes from hand-to-hand combat to clashes between massive armies. The Tain contains the historical seeds of the struggle for Irish nationalism. Ciaran Carson's lively conversational rendition of the Tain will bring the adventures of the iconic Irish hero to a new generation of readers interested in epic poetry and Irish history. In the first translation in 40 years, Carson brings the seminal work of Irish literature fully to life, capturing all the visceral power of an ancient epic. It is truly a classic for our time. It is definitely a mouthful. These words were definitely a struggle to get through sometimes because, I have tried to learn modern Irish and failed miserably, and ancient Irish is even that much more of a mystery to me. Alex, what about you?
It's never something I really tried. I told myself, like, I'm not going to worry about, like, pronunciation and enunciation and, like, some translations that he may have just, like, left the Irish word in there as, for whatever reason. Then I read the first paragraph and I was like, all right, I got to look up some of these. Cause one night when the royal bed had been prepared for Ailill and Maeve in Cruachan Fort in Connacht, they engaged in pillow talk. So I didn't know how to pronounce Ailill, I didn't know how to pronounce Maeve, or was it Cruachan? Cruachan?
I don't know.
But Maeve is spelled M-E-D-B.
See, I knew that going into it because I'd come across it in a lot of Irish names. Like Siobhan is a very famous one.
Yeah. The B can sometimes be a V.
Yeah, Siobhan is spelled Siobhan.
Yeah, S-I-O-B-A-N. But
Sheila is S-I-L-E. Did you know that, Alex?
I did not know. I've seen S-I-L-E like spelled that way before. I didn't know Sheila. Yeah, there's a lot of Irish names. There's a translation on some of them in the front of the book, so we just did our best with that. Like A-I-L-I-L-L is Alil, and not like Ailil, as you might pronounce in like American English.
Yeah, but so we're probably gonna pronounce these all over the place just because we're doing this on the fly and not trying to be super accurate.
There's probably also different ways of saying Cu Cullainn, because I've seen it Cu Cullainn and Cu Cullainn, and
it's pretty standard. Cu Cullainn is the accepted form. Most people get angry if you mess that one up, so try not to fuck up that one, Alex.
I'm no longer welcome in Ireland.
I just wanted to do some historical notes before we get into the actual text of this book.
Yeah, go for it.
This is what's called the Ulster Cycle. It is 4 cycles of ancient Irish literature. This is considered the longest and the most important of this cycle, of the Ulster Cycle. The other 3 cycles are the mythological cycle, which is about the Tuae Dananon, the Formians, and the Fir Bolg. This is like the fairy folk and fairy mounds and all that stuff. Then you have the Book of Invasion, the parts of this are the Book of Invasions, which is where the Iron Age kind of enters into Ireland. The Battle of Moytora and Children of Lear. Lear is one of the ancient Irish gods. Then you have the Ulster Cycle, which is considered the Red Branch. Red Branch could also be Royal Branch. It's, again, ancient Irish is very confusing. But yeah, most of these stories have Ulster as the heroes fighting the rest of Ireland. Often, especially in this book, Ulster is kind of its own nation, and they're always referring to the other four provinces as Ireland, and then Ulster kind of as above and separate. The third cycle is the Finian cycle. This is where we meet Finn McCool. And then you have the historical cycle, which is basically a listing of kings and rises and falls of the different kingdoms of Ireland, ancient Ireland, before all in prehistory. And then you start getting into actual history of Ireland, which starts around 500 AD, where you have the O'Neill tribe kind of making up their own myth stories, but we actually have some historical data to back it up. This story was originally, as I said earlier, it was all verbal. While Ireland did have its own written language called Ogham, it was more of a thing for signs and whatnot. It wasn't like road signs. They didn't really write epics with it.
Yeah, it wasn't used for storytelling. It's just like bump ahead.
Yeah, so everything, all these ancient stories were verbally told by druids or bards, and oftentimes what they would do to keep these stories from changing from telling to telling or generation to generation was they tell it in poetic form, because when you're rhyming words, it's a lot harder to change the words.
Yeah, it's just like songs are easier to remember than block of text. So that's why like you listen to music, you can usually get at least the chorus within a few listens.
Yeah.
That kind of deal. So even like Homer would do that. That's why Iliad and Odyssey are in verse, because he would stand on a milk crate and shout the poems at people for entertainment, and it would and people would be able to like go and tell the stories, and they hear it enough times and they can retell it, and it's really cool how that works.
Yeah. But again, so this story is being passed down word of mouth from generations until the Christian monks started writing it down. The problem is, and this causes lots of controversy, is nobody is quite sure what the monks changed in the stories to put in Christian values. All they know is that they heavily edited these stories.
Yeah, you definitely get a large like English chivalry feel to it when you're reading it. It's like they're talking about like code of combat and things like that, and like just like maintaining glory and order and code of conduct and chivalry. And it's like that's very like medieval England feel to it.
Yeah, so they were recording it, well after the monks had recorded it. It was recorded in Latin and Irish, and a lot of parts are in Irish, and it was kind of like considered an insult as, oh, this is a lesser story, because they didn't think it was on the level of like the Greek myths or the Bible, so they wanted to make sure that this wasn't as acknowledged. But it was translated, as I said, I guess it was 1969, originally translated from many, many fragments by Thomas Kinsella, and so that was kind of the first time it was translated into English and made into a mass public availability for people.
And that's crazy. It survived that long without being translated too. That's
well, I said it was a lot of fragments.
Times,
it was a lot. They don't have the complete story in one text. So again, as you read through this, it's obvious. It's just the way things are described. It's like, this seems really repetitive. Well, that's because it is because you're taking 30 different tellings of it, and because time in these kinds of mythical stories don't have any real true relevance. Just look at any Greek myth where either a hero like Hercules is either 30 years old or 300 years old, because just the way that the time frames work out.
Yeah, it depends on who's telling the story. And it's like that, like any folktale, it's going to have a million different versions to it.
Yeah. And the reason why this was eventually translated was because it was during the Troubles, and Ulster in Ireland, the Troubles was when the Provisional IRA started fighting the English pretty hard, and Ulster was looking for a big nationalist
so they're
cause.
looking back at like their history and Irish, like what it means to be Irish, and redefining their values. So the story does survive in that way, I guess.
Yeah. And then finally, for last historical note, many of the locations of the battle are known and can be followed, but many of these are non-Irish mythological places, and a lot of the times the names of the places, it was kind of weird where a warrior dies in a certain way, and the ford or stream or mountain is named after them, but it will say, oh, this was always named that, but now we're naming it this because of this warrior died here.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. Every time like Cu Cullainn kills somebody, they're like, and now that spot is called the guy who died Bog.
Yeah. But it's a kind of a big Irish, I guess, trope for the way the mythologists talk about historical Ireland like this, where all the stories are really tied to the land. It's the Irish equivalence of their spin on stories, where everything is land based and it's less about the characters and more about the land features, kind of, I guess. And it adds kind of a ownership to the land for the people that are living there.
Yeah, it's almost like in England, English stories, like you die and you're returned to the land, but in this story, like people die and they almost become the land. If that makes any sense.
Okay, well, so let's get into the actual story, Alex.
All right.
And this starts off with a big, long note from the translator. That is, as Alex already said, is kind of dry and confusing. And
yeah, I read Ciaran Carson's introduction, and gosh, that was probably the hardest part of the whole book to get through. This might be, as far as like talking about war and violence and Irish history, this might be the driest thing I ever read. Just like, and then, I found like a scrap of paper in the corner of the library, and it had the word Tain on it, so I knew this must be related somehow. It's like, oh my god.
one thing that was interesting was his explanation of why it changes prose types, forms of writing. Because it's basically 4 different types of writing mixed together, where you have two versions of different kinds of poetic writing and 2 different styles of prose, and basically saying why he chose to do these where he did, and how they were in the scraps that he was looking at, how they were doing it, and trying to stay as true to those as possible. But also because when translating poetry, it doesn't often sound right, because as we said, when you're saying something in poetic form, the words are rhyming and there's a cadence to it. But when you're translating from ancient Irish to modern English, you lose a lot of that cadence and that rhyming schemes, and it can be basically, as he points out, impossible to actually make it sound as fluent as the original language. So that was just kind of, the main pull I pulled from that was just, okay, so that why it can seem, part of the reason why it seems so choppy and repetitive at times.
Yeah, that's actually probably one of the more interesting features of the book, is the like switching between different styles of storytelling. It does catch your eye, and you just all of a sudden, like, a piece of verse pops up, and you're like, oh, I should pay more attention to this, because this is probably a big moment.
So then we get into the actual story, and
begins with pillow talk.
And the first, I guess, like 6 pages, you could write multiple PhD theses on, I think.
Yeah.
Just because it's filling in so much information, backstory, because there's a lot to talk about, and just bringing in Irish culture, the status of men and women in powerful positions, and Irish culture of that time. And yeah, what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, it definitely kind of sets up Maeve and Alil primarily as they're like the main antagonists of the story, and they're a king and a queen. And this whole thing starts over basically just like a fit of jealousy from the queen.
Yeah, basically the Queen Maeve wants to be considered more powerful than her husband, because she doesn't want to. Basically, it all comes down to egos. She's like, I'm from the more powerful family. I brought in all this wealth to you. You're just a younger son of a bit large family, and your status as the king you are would not be what it is without me. And he's like, well, wait a second. Let me show you. And we basically find out that Alil has one more thing than she does, and that tears the whole kingdom apart.
Yeah, he's got a bull. So
a prize bull, Alex. It's the best bull in Ireland, except for the one in Ulster.
Yeah. So Maeve wants the bull from Ulster, and so the Trojans started a war over the most beautiful woman in all of Greece. She's starting a war for the best bull in all of Ireland.
I mean, come on. What would you rather fight and die for, Alex? A bull or a pretty girl? I mean,
That's true. Yeah, you got a point there.
I mean, the bull can at least provide more than the pretty girl. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah. I want to
for reasons for starting a world war, this is probably slightly more appropriate.
Yeah, she starts with like bribery, which is funny because she always keeps coming back to like what she'll like give in return for the bull. So she's like, it's like I'll grant him a piece of smooth plain of AI. That must be some land, right? Yeah. I'll grant him a smooth plain of I as big as all his lands, and a chariot worth thrice 7 bondsmaids, as well as the friendship of my own thighs.
Yeah, she does like to spread those thighs.
Yeah,
and her daughter's thighs.
Yeah, she likes to. She always throws that in right at the very end. Like, oh yeah, and the friendship of my thighs.
It is a very open marriage, so it's not like she's just secretly cheating on the king. It is they just basically sleep with whoever they feel like.
Yeah, it's. I think that's just a common thing you might find with kings and queens a lot of the time.
Well, and I think it's also fairly common in at least ancient Irish literature where that was a more quote unquote acceptable thing. I think they've discovered in real life that is not the case, but in the stories they make it sound that way. And I know the Christian monks, that's one of the things that they kind of demonize in a lot of the queens, saying all these queens are just sleeping around, filthy whores. But I think at the same time, the ancient Irish culture was kind of considered more open in that way too for people of power. It was Brehon law, which again is very bastardized from what it originally was, what people think of it now. But one of the things they do know is that it did have allowances for women and men that were not married, quote unquote, to have other sorts of relationships and how those fell into the scope of the law. So okay. Another point of thing before we get too far into this, chariots in Ireland, apparently not a thing. They don't know why they were mentioned in these stories, but they said there's no evidence that any chariots were ever used in Ireland in war.
So like
let alone for transportation. Basically, people ran around on foot.
So like when Mel Gibson did Braveheart and everyone's wearing kilts, even though it's not historically accurate that they wore kilts in that time?
Exactly. Right. Or that they wore kilts in battle to begin with.
Yeah.
That's one of the big misnomers. It was like, it's like, try running around in a skirt with no underwear on in a muddy field and tell me what happens to your nether regions. Yeah.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah. It's like, so, not a thing. But in this book, chariots come up quite a bit. So, no one's really sure where these came in or why they were added in, but it's chariots are a very valuable thing that are often thrown around, and they're worth more than gold and silver and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's like saying like everybody in America drives around in a Rolls Royce. Like it's not really actually very accurate.
Yeah. But yeah, so Maeve sends some underlings to go make a deal with Ulster to get the bull. They get the deal made, but then the guys get drunk and they say, well, if your king hadn't given up the bull, we would have taken it by force anyways. Which then the king of Ulster said, you know what? Fuck you. You're not getting the bull. They go back to Maeve. The underlings go back to Maeve and say, yeah, you didn't give us the bull because we said this. And Maeve's like, well, since you said that, I got to do it now. So she called up the army, all of her armies, all of Alleel's armies, and all the armies of Ireland to go march against Ulster.
Yeah, and then they begin marching.
Yes, and they march and
march. Similar to, I keep making comparisons to other ancient epics, but like in the beginning of the Iliad, they get like a seer to like predict what's going to happen in the war or to create a vision of what's going to happen, and that happens in this story too. Where
except that it's like pretty straightforward. Like you're going to lose.
Yeah, the seer's like, Cullen's going to wreck your shit, and they're like, all right, that's cool. All right, move on. That's a common thing with a lot of these ancient myths.
So the other myths, at least, are like more vague. Like someone's gonna die.
Yeah, the fortune tellers and the seers are largely ignored.
Yeah. But it said these ones are like pretty straightforward. It's like, no, you are going to lose. Instead, where a lot of the Greek ones are, it could be considered either way, and it's just the foreshadowing that the reader knows. Oh, this is going to end badly. It's like this one's like, no, you are going to lose. And they're like, Maeve, you will live, but you're going to be hated by all your people because you killed all their sons.
Yeah, she's just like, well, got that bull, right?
Yeah, about that. So one problem I had with this telling, and I understand why he didn't put it in because it would have bogged this story down even more. We don't get a lot of backstory. So she marches up into Ulster, and it just says, "Oh, no one's going up against her," and it takes deep into the story to figure out why. In Ulster, there's this curse where all the men in Ulster, whenever they're about to go to battle, basically become bedridden and can't get out, and it's unclear whether it's 3 days, 3 months, 3 years. It's something
Depends on
weird.
who's telling the story.
Yeah, and it's like basically it comes down to whatever makes it more dramatic. I forget how the curse goes. We've mentioned it before, but there's a Myth and Legends podcast. I'll post the first episode in the link. He does a really good job retelling this story of Cu Cullainn and all the battles. So he goes deep into what the curse is, deep into Cu Cullainn's past, because that is a lot more vivid than it is let on here. I don't know if did you read any of the notes, Alex?
I didn't read the notes, no.
Okay, I didn't either in this, but having heard that podcast and then rereading this, it's like there's a lot missing that explains a lot if you listen to this other version.
They go into a little bit with him because he has his own chapter. Like they learn about Cu Cullainn. It's like, yeah, at 7 he was a master wrestler, and he's like big and he's yoked, and he's like a huge just turned to adult guy, and he's gonna fuck you up.
Yeah, and then he has his superpower where he transforms, and they don't really get into it. But what it is he literally turns into like a Mr. Hyde, where he bulks out like the Hulk, but then his guts come out, spew out of his chest cavity, or his cavity. His eyes pop out of his head and just hang down, and he's just this grotesque monster, but that nobody can match in battle because he's just so spectacular at fighting. It's like the weirdest transformation that you're like, this guy should be dead right now, but he just said hulks out to this weird thing that would be in any you see in a horror movie and you think this is the most ridiculous thing we've ever seen. It would be like a Evil Dead kind of level of this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Yeah, and like we see that too. It's like he's he finds out they're marching, and he's like the one who stands up to him.
Yeah,
first.
For some reason the curse does not affect him.
Yeah,
it doesn't explain why. He's the only male in Ulster that does not get hit by the curse.
Yeah, so he engages in guerrilla warfare, and he's killing the army single-handedly.
But yeah, so we get this history of Cu Cullainn, how he's this basically amazing warrior that just walks out of nowhere, out of the fogs at 7, matches all these warriors in training, where he can by himself he can defeat 150 teenage warriors by himself. He goes to Scotland to train under this woman warrior, and basically him and several others become the ultimate warriors of the world, doing all these crazy feats. And then he's come back to Ireland, and he's like, do I gotta fight these guys? And his dad's like, there's no one else. Okay, I guess I'll do it. And what ends up happening is a series of basically one-on-one combat where he's defeating the Ulster's best warriors, and then they keep seeing, oh, this guy's just beating us, so they keep cheating, and then he gets mad, hulks out, and kills 200 warriors at a go that try to throw an ambush on him. And
yeah, there's like a whole chapter where it's like he kills a bunch of people. Maeve and Alil are like, truce? And he's like, all right, cool. And then they try and kill him again. He kills a bunch of people, and Maeve and Alil are like, hey, how about a truce? Why don't we have a truce this time? And more people try and kill, and it's just like, it happens like 8 times, and then finally it's like, all right, no more truces, guys.
Yeah, it's just very kind of casual in the way they talk about it. It's just like, I guess we could try it again.
It's like when I don't know, it's like siblings are fighting or whatever. Like one will hit the other, and then they'll get into a slap fight or whatever, and then like one will be like, truce, 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 and then they'll be like, fine, fine. And then they'll hit one more time, and then be like, we said truce, truce, truce. It's like, Silly little thing. I did
Yeah.
want to. They also give a little bit about the bull. I wanted to talk about this bull.
Yeah, because that's why this whole thing's being fought over.
The bull's name is Don Cullainn.
Try that again, Alex.
Cuailnge.
Cool. Cooley.
Don Cooley.
So it's a brown bull.
Yeah, brown bull. All right.
That's the literal translation from Irish is brown bull. So Don Cooley.
I just want to describe him because this is a hell of a Tinder profile. He could bull 50 heifers every day. They'd calve at the same hour the next day, and those that didn't would burst, overwhelmed as they were by the offspring of the brown bull. 50 grown young fellows would play games every evening on the broad of his back. His shadow could shelter 100 warriors from heat or cold. Another of his qualities was this, that no ghost or gremlin or battle demon would dare approach the zone in which he stood. And every evening as he came to his byre, the bass swell of his low resounding throughout the four quarters of Cooley to make great music for his people. That's a weird sentence at the end. I don't like that. But yeah, it's we'll cut that part out. But yeah, so he's a good bull. He's kind of read that and it's almost like, oh yeah, you could start a war for that guy.
Yeah. I mean, 50 heifers. That's impressive.
I know. I mean, that's a slow weekend for these guys, but whatever.
Okay, and Cu Cullainn got his name. That's not his original name. A lot of heroes, like Hercules, is a big one where that's not their original name. They earn those names, and so Cu Cullainn earned his name through a feat that he did. And basically, what he did was he was invited to he had a battle, won it. Was invited to go to this king's castle. Once he recovered, he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go by." Well, the king gets back, completely forgets about Cu Cullainn that he said, "Oh, yeah, this guy's gonna come later." So he tells his guards, "Yeah, close the gate, let the hounds out who are gonna protect my castle while we're all inside drinking ourselves stupid." So the guards say, "Okay, sounds good." Cu Cullainn comes wandering in later that night. The hounds attack him. He kills the hounds. And the king's like, "Oh no, you killed my hounds!" And Cu Cullainn's like, "Well, you invited me, and then you sent hounds on me." And they're having this argument, and finally, Cu Cullainn says, "Okay, well, I understand. You just forgot. No big deal. I'll now be your hound and protect your castle." So Cu Cullainn is basically the hound. So that's where his name came from. So he protects this basically the king and then Ulster. So that's why the name has this big meaning.
Okay. Yeah, picture the hound from Game of Thrones, but younger and happier.
So and I'll just read you the quote here of part of that story. "Is there anyone else to come?" "No one," said Concobar. He'd forgotten he had invited his foster son to join him. "I have a mastiff hound," said Cullainn, "with 3 chains on him and 3 men at the end of every chain. He's a Spanish breed. Let him loose to guard the livestock and lock up the fort." Meanwhile, the lad was approaching Culainn's house. To shorten the way, he'd thrown his ball a long way, then judging the distance exactly, he'd throw his hurley after the ball so that the hurley struck the ball. Then he'd run after them and catch ball and stick before they hit the ground. The hound got his scent and began to bay. Then it went for him. The lad struck the ball with his hurley so that the ball shot down the throat of the hound and carried its insides out through its backside. Then he grabbed 2 of its legs and smashed it to pieces against the nearby pillar stone. So that's how he got his nickname, the Hound.
Nice.
The Hound of Cullainn. So, and that kind of grotesque brutality is pretty on par for the whole story. We're just like, yeah, and then he just gutted this guy, his guts spilled out, and as he's begging for his life, Culleinn's like, meh, and crushed his skull. So the story feels repetitive, and it has the thing where whenever a new character is named, we get the whole family history of every name of any notable father, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-grandmother. I mean, it's not as bad as it could be. I know. I guess you read some really old translations, and it just every time that character's named, they do that again. It's almost like a copy-paste thing to add word counts.
Yeah, even the Bible does that. Builds it up.
Yeah. But yeah, so Cu Cullainn is fighting this war. He makes friends with the messenger from Maeve, and basically they're able to have these conversations and have a rapport A lot of the ambushes are ruined by this messenger who says, "Hey, by the way, Maeve and Alil are going to betray you, so watch out." Or, "Hey, this fighter's coming in here. This is what his specialty is."
Yeah, they after the guerrilla tactics go on for a while, Alil and Maeve start sending like their champions after Cu Cullainn, hoping to best him in single combat. So he has to fight 3 people. There's a guy named Leg, and Tar McColl, and Nad Crantail. They all meet their demise rather quickly. They all last for about 2 pages.
Yeah, but most of these battles are very fast and matter of fact.
And that's where a lot of the dryness comes in, because it's just page after page of like, and then he killed 15 people, and then he crossed a river, and then he killed 15 more by nightfall, and then he slept until the sun rose again, and he slayed another 10, and it's just like hundreds of pages of that.
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
so this is a fairly short book. It's only like 200 pages long.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot.
and it drags like a 1,000-page book at times. It feels like, just because it is just going on and on and on. And matter of fact, one note I put here was at one point he kills 150 kings of Ireland, and that stood out to me because knowing Irish history, that is, Ireland was always, when England was first looking to invade Ireland, it was called the island of 150 kings, because every clan, its leader was called himself a king. So there just said all these little, basically, compounds dotted throughout the whole island, and everyone was like their own war band. And it would be maybe 100 people in this clan, but they'd own a few hundred acres, and that was their kingdom. And then it would go up to a level of a region where then they would all agree through strength of arm or persuasion, okay, this is the king that rules this group of kings. And then it would go up to the province, which, as I said, there's 5 provinces, but now we recognize 4. But there used to be the province of Tara, which was Central Ireland, which was had its own special consideration. But you had the provincial kings, and then you had the high king, which usually sat in Tara. And even though they were high king, they were more just like, I don't even know what you would call it. It was something you just said, yeah, you're high king, but really you don't control anybody. And their job was to, when they were invaded by outsiders, to raise armies from around Ireland to go push back the invaders. But because all the tribes were always warring with each other, basically it didn't have any real bite to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But so when he says Cu Cullainn killed the 150 kings of Ireland, that's a direct reference to that sort of thing where there's 150 tribes in Ireland, and they're all kings. So he killed the king of every tribe in Ireland.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Yeah. Just a small thing, but so that was a something I noticed. So
it was a good pullout. Good job.
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah,
well done.
Yeah, you're falling asleep already, I can tell.
Yeah, it's getting hot in this room. I'm liking it.
I put the heat on a little high. Yeah. I took my shirt off, turned the heat on too high.
Boy, he took his shirt off, and I'm sweating.
You didn't realize we're talking about a smut book.
Oh, we got those coming up later in the season. Don't worry.
Hopefully. Okay, so that was kind of the last of the big notes I had until we get to the final boss battle.
Yes. There's like little bits where like Cu Cullainn, he does actually, like, he is actually sustaining some wounds, and he has to sleep for like 3 days to recover.
Yeah, we get the big battle goddess talking to him, the Morrigan, and there's this whole side story with her that I think we come up a little bit later.
Yeah, the gods in these kinds of stories always like to intervene just a little bit, just like give it a little nudge.
One thing I did notice with this story versus a lot of other ancient myths, the gods, they're not really involved with this one. They're kind of just side characters. Where, like, you're thinking about the Greek myths, they're actively like taking sides and giving people, imbuing powers into people, and sometimes even going out into battle. Where this one's like, yeah, this is kind of a nice entertainment, but we're just gonna kind of heal you up and go on our merry way again, and not really do anything to. It's up to you to make it happen. Yeah, they're not. They're part of the story, but they're not driving the story, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a couple stories like that in the Greek myths, but yeah, they're usually a little more involved. Yeah. Like Poseidon plays a large part in Odysseus not making a home for 20 years, yada yada. But
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
yeah,
Next month.
little foreshadowing.
But yeah, so we get two battles. One is I forget what order they're in, but one's we get Fergus first, and Fergus was the king of Ulster, got kicked out, and he's now on the side of Maeve trying to regain his kingdom, sort of, not really. But basically, he goes into what happened with him is early in the story he ends up sleeping with Maeve. Allele catches them doing their thing, so he steals Fergus's sword and hides it. So Fergus can't go into battle because he has no weapons. Well, Fergus is forced to go into one-on-one combat with Cu Cullainn, but because he has no weapon, he goes to Cu Cullainn and says, "Hey, if you surrender and leave the field of battle when we match up against each other, next time we face up, I will flee the battle and you can take the day." And Cu Cullainn's like, "Yeah, sounds good. I can do that." So kind of like, yeah, it seems like, oh, what's the point of that? But there's a small payoff later in the story. But then we get into the big battle where Cu Cullainn is forced to fight his
It's like a
foster brother. And this is one of the guys that he fought with in Scotland, and where they basically killed every warrior in the world, and they are equally matched.
Yeah, this is an important thing for any time you have like a Superman type character like Cu Cullainn is. You gotta have somebody who is his equal to fight with. Otherwise, it'd just be really boring. Like, yeah, and like I keep saying, like it's like he killed 35 people, and then he killed 35 more, and then he killed 20 more people the next day. And yada yada. So
it took a day off, and it only killed 15. And
yeah, going back to the earliest story with Epic of Gilgamesh, even that story had it where Gilgamesh had to battle Enkidu, and like they were equally matched, but in the end, Gilgamesh was just like he was one better, so he won in the end, and that's what we get here with Cu Cullainn and Ferdad.
Yeah, so Ferdad challenges them, and Cu Cullainn says, "Okay, pick your weapon." So day one, they fight with whatever weapon and do damage to each other. But basically, as the sun goes down, they're both like, "Okay, this is going nowhere. We're gonna go to bed, take a break. We'll meet up again tomorrow." Next day, Ferdad says, "Okay, your turn to pick, Cu. Whatever weapon you want." So he picks his weapon. They fight all day, hurting each other more. Gets to sunset. No one gaining the advantage. Okay, we're gonna go to bed. Next day, Ferdad gets to pick his choice of weapons, and Cu Cullainn trips up and gets mortally wounded. Well, almost mortally wounded. And he calls to his charioteer, who is watching from the sideline, "Throw me," I forget what the weapon is called, but "throw me this weapon." And the weapon is just this convoluted weapon that's like, how does this even work? But basically, Cu Cullainn cheats to win the day. Kills his best friend, his foster brother, and goes into this major mourning. We get pages upon pages of poetic, I don't even know what to call it, just his mourning of killing this guy, all because of Maeve promising her daughter for Dad for marriage. And Maeve has been promising her daughter to everybody, by the way. It's just like, this girl's gonna have like 500 marriages on the table if they ever won if they had ever won anything. So, but the way I looked at it was, Cu Cullainn may have cheated, but the fact that he had been cheated against so often himself, it almost seemed like, yeah, there's this, like you were saying, chivalry in battle. And like we were talking before we aired it, at one point Cu Cullainn said, was fighting a woman, and says, and he defeats her, and he says, "I don't kill women." Then immediately kills her and says, "Well, not all the time." And this is kind of like that kind of thing. It's like, well, Cu Cullainn cheated, but that's just war. That's just what you do. And as long as you fought boldly and you took it, that the consequences are inconsequential.
Yeah, I kind of related it to Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Mallory. It's like the King Arthur cycles, and it's like, yeah, they strove to, like, all the knights were striving to be pure and chivalrous and always do the right thing, and they always, with the exception of Sir Galahad, always came up short. They always laid with women. They always cheated in battle. They always failed to help their fellow man in some way, shape, or form, regardless of how hard they were trying to do their best. And I think that Cu Cullainn's just no different. He's striving to do his best, but he's not a perfect
He also doesn't want to die.
Exactly. Eventually, human instinct takes over, and you have to. He has to live with that.
Yeah. So, but Cu Cullainn's also said mortally wounded, and his charioteer pulls him out, and it's like, what are we going to do? And that's when we get the Morrigan coming back, and we get this whole story of how she had, before the battle, gone to him as, I think, a beggar, and he basically told her to bugger off 3 times and curse on her and all that stuff. And then, but if he ever forgave her, the curse would be lifted. But he had to do it 3 times. She comes back, heals, starts the healing process. He unwittingly forgives her 3 times, and then she reveals herself as the Morrigan, and it's like this whole thing. And then he ends up finding one of the other gods to finish healing him, which is like, so what was the point of having the 2 gods that? But again, I think that's just the fragments thing where it's 2 different stories, and
yeah, it's just kind of pieced together. It's very like Deus Ex Machina. It's like, and then the gods came down and healed him.
Yeah, but he's also basically out of the rest of the battles at that point until the very, very end, because he's so wounded, he's healing. But the curse conveniently lifted, and the rest of Ulstermen can go fight. And now they are, Maeve, and not so much Maeve, but Alleel's like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Because he realizes that Cu Cullainn bled them dry, and their armies are falling apart.
Yeah, he's killed hundreds and thousands of their armies, so it's...
I think they have something like 300,000 soldiers in their army, and they've lost half of them, and Ulster is now matching their army strength.
Yeah, I was like talking about, like, he's like bragging about wiping out 1/3 of Maeve's army, and, like, single-handedly. But yeah, the rest of the soldiers recover. There's some after the Ferdad battle, the chapters kind of go quick, but yeah, they do big battle. There's skirmishing, and eventually they start driving Maeve and Alleel back as they unite and as an Irish people.
And we
push
get
forward.
we get a huge list of all the Ulster kings and noblemen that joined into battle and all their heroic deeds, or a list of their heroic deeds. And so at that point, I was just kind of speed reading through that because it was giving us something. It's kind of like the Argonauts, where anyone of any sort of down the line fame were trying to tie themselves back to some famous story. Oh yeah, we were part of that battle group, or we had an ancestor in that battle group. And then it said all of a sudden the Argonauts went from a crew of like 9 to 500, depending on which version you listen to. And
yeah.
But so that's kind of where I took that. Then we get to the more interesting part. Maeve, had gotten the bull, and they're trying to get it back to Connacht. They get it back to Connacht. The 2 bulls meet and then kill each other.
Yeah, what an ending.
That's not even quite the ending, because they're still battling. Well, the bulls are also fighting, and so the brown bull kills the white bull, runs back to Ulster, and then drops down dead. And then said the battle's raging among humans, and Cu Cullainn finally was watching the battle, and was like, I can't miss out any more of this battle because I want my glory too, even though he's basically won his glory already. And he ends up going down and causing more mayhem, and Alleel gives Fergus his sword back to him, says, go fight Cu Cullainn. Fergus shows up, says, we must now fight each other, and Cu Cullainn calls in that favor. It's like, no, you have to now run. You can't stay in battle. And so he takes his army and leaves, and because of that, all the other armies flee. One of the big things in this, Maeve is a total badass bitch. Basically, she's a warrior queen going in, and basically when she goes into battle, she's killing men by the dozen also.
Yeah.
So it's not like she's just this dainty flower ordering men around. No, she's a badass bloodthirsty bitch too, and
I'm sure she appreciates being called that.
Oh, I'm sure she's quite proud of that. She's like, fucking A, right? I am. Kill these motherfuckers. But her army loses, and then she's humiliated by Cu Cullainn. And it was that's one of those things where it's like, man, that it's like, are the monks really trying to tear her down because she's a woman that bad? Because it kind of comes off that way, where basically all of a sudden she gets her period and starts gushing blood, and Cu Cullainn catches her while she's standing in the bushes bleeding out, and is like, yeah, I'm not going to kill you because you're a pathetic woman, and go home.
Yeah, it seems like almost like the humiliation of that moment that he bestows upon her is worse than him killing her in that moment. So that's like she has to like flee in shame.
Yeah. So in the end, Maeve and Alleel basically lose everything and
live in peace.
And yeah, they go back to where it started.
Yeah.
Nothing is resolved. That is the story.
Yeah, it is funny. Like the ending is just like, for 7 years after that, no one was killed in battle between them. I'm like, I feel like that's not a long time.
That's because they were all dead and they had to wait for the sons to age up to become warriors, basically.
Yeah.
So, Alex, final thoughts.
I don't know, I had mixed reviews on it. Just the translation's dry. The storytelling is really rough in places. It's a slog to get through. I mean, but it does have its charm. It does have its qualities. It's an ancient text, and you were doing a lot of the history behind it, and tying in a lot of Irish culture, and I think that's where its importance stands. Is it's a testament to the Irish people and their history.
One of the things I noticed, like, if you don't know the backstory, a lot of this stuff glossed over a lot of the backstories of all these characters. And so, listen to the Myths and Legends podcast to get more detailed on the main characters here. But if you don't know any of that stuff going into this, you're like, what the fuck did I just read? This is crazy. This is just over the top. I don't understand it. But when you start learning all that other details through that, again, when they're telling this stuff back in the day verbally, these people are going to know these other stories. These are, they're being retold their favorite movie kind of thing. They're being reread their favorite book kind of thing. This isn't, we're reading this and we're like, I have no clue what's going on. I have no connection to these people. This story's told in a strange way that I'm not really familiar with, and then on top of it, you got the bad translation, or the dry translation, I should say. Because I'm imagining the translation is well done. It's just the storytelling took a hit at it, but we don't have a lot of that information, so therefore we just don't have that connection to what's going on.
Yeah, it was kind of like sophomore year when we read Oedipus in high school English. They spent an entire class just giving us all the background necessary to understand what Oedipus is about. Because, otherwise it'd be this kind of weirdly worded murder mystery, and with no idea, what's the point of any of this?
Yeah, so for the people of that time, they know all these stories, they know all this, and it's like Harry Potter or the Chronicles of Narnia. You're getting bits and pieces of it just through the culture. You're not even reading the material or watching the movies. Just the culture of it. You know the story already, and then when you finally read the main stories, you're like, okay, this is kind of clicking in with all these other things. And
yeah, you can't even see that with the Marvel movies.
Yeah, that would be probably a better example for people.
It's like all of you don't start with the Avengers. All of Iron Man's character development happens in the movies before the Avengers, and then the Avengers is just action, and you can understand his motivations and his reasonings because he watched the previous movies. But
and then on top of it, because there's so many other stories of Iron Man and Captain America, you've already heard other stories about them, so you kind of go in knowing a general arc of who that person is beforehand, even before you even watch the Marvel versions of them.
Yeah. So I think that would have benefited. You have a lot more background knowledge of Irish history than I do, so you probably appreciated this story a lot more than I did. I appreciated it as an old Irish epic. I really love those old stories and digging deep into them. I think if I'd taken a class and read this with a class, I probably would have been a lot more entertained. But reading it on my own and trying to pull out the important bits, it was a challenge, especially first time, and it's not a subject area or a history lesson that I've really taken the time to learn. So.
Yeah. So I enjoyed rereading it. It is dry. It is difficult. It is repetitive. It would be nice if we had people that were retelling the story, redoing the story, telling it in a more modern way, keeping the same core. Like I said, Neil Gaiman and Stephen Fry are good examples of people that have taken the old mess and made it into a more readable version for the modern audiences.
Yeah. Could you imagine if Tolkien had done a translation? That would have been amazing. He did Beowulf, and it's regardless one of the best translations ever of any text. And I don't know. I think you would have done really well with that.
Yeah, as I don't know, some of these things to today's audience are so extreme in what we consider good versus evil, where the guys we're supposed to be cheering are just doing terrible things. It would be tough to convince a modern audience, no, this is the guy you're supposed to root for, because Cu Cullainn can be a very problematic hero at times.
Yeah, I think in some stories he's portrayed as a villain.
Yeah, and
Finn McCool, I think, is his nemesis. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those deals where it's just the text is just very hard to read in this story, and says it's interesting stuff. It's fun to analyze, but it is dense. So I got some questions for you, Alex. You ready?
Lay 'em on me.
You have not been forewarned of any of these, so if Alex's answers
Nothing
seem
up my sleeve.
so if Alex seems a little confused at these and struggles to answer them, it's because he is on the fly trying to come up with PhD level responses to these very pedestrian questions.
The bumbling silence will make for great radio. Lay 'em on me.
Okay, is Queen Maeve a villain in the story, or is it more complex than that, and how?
Yes. Well, she's
Very good, Alex. Moving on.
A lot of people confuse like antagonist versus bad guy. Like you can have good guys that are antagonists as much as you can have protagonists that are bad dudes. But I would say it is interesting because a lot of these stories early on, like they have clear cut bad guys and good guys, good versus evil, and this is a little bit less than that. Like she's definitely not a good person. She's definitely I would call her a bad person, not just because she's a politician.
Well, I think all of them are said equally bad at times, though. It's just she is. I think part of it is the Christian monks wrote her as a villain because they were like powerful woman. No.
Yeah, but I don't know. She started a war over a bull. Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, but if you understand Irish culture, bulls or cows were their currency. Like cattle raids was their version of bank robbing, and that was like their pastime in Irish culture. Was just stealing each other's cows. So knowing that, it's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go steal this bull. Okay, that's just it says the cattle. The original story was called the Cattle Raid of Cooley.
Yeah, and just because other people in the story are bad too, like you can't just be like other people were doing it. Like it's like you're still a bad person. Like so, she's the villain of the story. She is the bad guy. She is a little more complex than that though. Like because they give some reasoning behind it. And
well,
obviously,
I
as
think
queen, you have in this era, you have a certain air of authority, and like you kind of got domain over your kingdom. So
in a lot of ways they're just all human. They're not like in today's standards, there are very few people that are either good or bad. I mean, you can say Hitler and Stalin, yeah, they are bad, but how many rulers have we had in the last 50, 100 years that you can say, yeah, they did bad things, they did good things. They are more complex, and I think this story did a good job of saying, yeah, these are just people. They have their foibles, they have their flaws, but they also have what makes them why they became rulers to begin with.
Yeah, and it's like you're a monarch. It's like you're gonna have an ego about you. You're gonna treat people's lives like they are your luxury.
And I mean, she does rally all of Ireland except for Ulster against Ulster. I mean, obviously she has the respect of all the other leaders of the island. So
yeah.
So she can't be just you're not going to be a terrible dictator because she's not High Queen. Ailill is not High King of Ireland. They're just a king and queen of one of the provinces of Ireland, one of the 5 provinces. So they're kind of, so the fact that they're able to rally the other Munster and Tara and blanking on the third one there. But these other provinces to say, hey, come fight with us, and they're like, yeah, let's go. Says that this is a strong leader.
Yeah, so yeah, I would say she's a flawed character, but overall,
I mean, yeah. In the story, she's bad because we're cheering for the Ulstermen. But so you told slightly differently, it could be flipped around. Oh yeah, this is just one of the gangster movies where you're cheering for the gangsters.
Yeah,
for like Al Capone kind of thing.
Or even like this is a stupid comparison, but in the Karate Kid, like when Cobra Kai came out, like Johnny tells his version of the story, and it's like, yeah, he stole my girlfriend. He his sensei beat me up. Like this whole thing. So yeah, there's always multiple perspectives.
Yeah. Is there a moral to this story?
I think that theme of like unity, like and the Ulstermen coming together and doing the final pushback, like it's like kind of just got like a nationalist kind of view of like we're coming together as a nation, we are stronger than we are separate kind of feel to it.
I took it as don't compare your wealth to your wife.
That works too.
This whole story could have been avoided if he just said, "Yes, dear, you're wealthier than I am. Thank you very much."
He's got a humble brag. He's like, my bull, man, that thing is a pain in the ass. Got these horns are too beautiful. If you ask me.
No, you know what the crazy thing is? That bull, the white bull, was Maeve's to begin with. It just went to his fields. So it was like breeding his cow. So he took, oh yeah, that's my cow because it's in my field. It's like, but it was her bull. It's like, so it's like you could have said, yeah, we have 50-50 custody of this bull. What aspects of this story make it an epic? What qualifies a story as an epic?
So epic, it's taken on like a secondary meaning of being like something that's like super like radical and cool and amazing. But epic just really means long story, specifically poetry, like a long poem, like an epic poem, like Canterbury Tales or the Iliad or the Odyssey or Beowulf. Those are epics because they are long poems. This qualifies for that because it's a long tale. It's a long story.
It is in sections poems. As we said, it probably originally started as basically a poem because it was word of mouth, being told, and that's how I said a lot of times they would keep a story from changing is putting in poetic form.
Yeah, so that's the only reason. The only reason it might qualify as an epic is because it's a ancient tale that was told at great length.
Okay,
it's kind of like time periods are called epics for that reason.
Okay, so I don't know if you caught on this, but Cu Cullainn has a triple birth. Do you know what the significance of that is?
I do not. I notice they do a lot of like threes.
Yeah, so
there's like
so
3 days of battle. He fights 3 champions.
Yeah, so in Ireland or Celtic tradition in general, 3 is considered a magical number, and basically by having 3 births, it gives him the mystical powers to become a great warrior who's got strength, cunning, and wisdom. Did you know Ireland actually has 3 names?
I did not.
Okay, I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but
you tease.
But it is a big deal. It's in the Song of Adam, I believe, or I forget the Irish version of the name Adam, but basically when the Milsons are invading Ireland, they're sailing up from Spain, and their ships are being repelled by Ireland by storm, and the druid, who is one of the famous brothers that takes over Ireland, has to sing Ireland's three names out to calm the waters and allow entrance to the island. Okay. So it's a considered a strong magic number. I know in a lot of modern fairy tales, if you ask something say something 3 times, it compels whatever thing to follow your orders. That came from this culture.
Okay, so like the Beetlejuice and the Bloody Marys and all that.
Yeah. What roles do women play in this story? How do you think it reflects on ancient Irish society?
I mean, they are treated with like Cu Cullainn won't kill women except for when he does, but it seems to be on a more, I guess, equal standing with the males. Instead of being like males being like full on patriarchy, there's like Queen Maeve is definitely in charge. Morgan is a female goddess that's widely recognized.
I mean, she's basically the most powerful god of Irish literature, and the only god that's more powerful or called more powerful is the Dagda, which is the father god, who's her husband, and the only reason why he became the father god is because she married him.
Yeah, there seems to be a mutual respect between the men and women in the story.
Yeah, I mean, compared to modern society, it's definitely not equal, but compared to ancient society, it's considered one of the more equal societies that there was.
Yeah, and like some of it could have also been like if it was written down by Catholic monks who had lower reviews of female, like the roles of females and gender roles and specific, like that could also been a thing where they kind of bring down the role of women in the story as well.
And while it wasn't common to have a lot of like female rulers, it wasn't unheard of either. It was it wasn't common, but it happened enough that no one batted an eyelash. Oh, that's like Queen Maeve. We serve Queen Maeve. That's no big deal that we're serving under a woman and she's leading our battles. That's no humiliation for the men. He says if she's that badass enough that the men are willing to follow, that's just the status quo. But I said it wasn't 50-50 split by any stretch of the imagination, or you had one a generation kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Does Cu Cullainn follow the warrior's code? How would could he be perceived in today's society if someone wanted to make an adaptation to the story?
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit when I was talking about the chivalry and the Arthur's knights and stuff. Like he tries his best. You see that especially when he's battling for Dad. There's a clear mutual respect until he's about to die, and then preservation kicks in. He cheats, and he kind of goes back on his oaths.
See, I see him as more of a problematic to today's heroes. You'd really have to change him to like almost Disneyfy him to like they do with Hercules and some of these other Greek heroes to really kind of play him down as to what a bastard he could be.
Yeah, he's almost devoid of like flaws. Like he's unbeatable. He's stunningly good looking. He's incredibly strong. He's this Adonis of a man, and you got to kind of try and find those flaws that are hidden beneath his actions. And like there's something like he breaks his chivalric code. He kills women. He cheats in battle and breaks truces. Yada yada. So he's got problems. I think if there was an adaptation, they'd probably still make them. You got to make your heroes flawed nowadays. They got to have flaws that they need to overcome. It's like I feel like half the hero stories.
He almost seems like sociopathic when it's just nonchalantness of I'm just killing hundreds of people and it doesn't faze me one bit.
Yeah, except for Dad. He kills for Dad, and it really bothers him.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, you've killed like 2,000 people.
Yeah, but it's his foster brother. I mean, come on, they fought battles together. Yeah, that bonds you more than anything in the world.
It's like throwing severed heads at people's families, and it's
like. Cu Cullainn's warp spasm is changing. Did you pick up on that at all, or was that something that kind of you missed, Alex?
I think I missed my initial read.
Okay, so you don't really have any thoughts on that at all?
I picture like a D&D. I played it recently, like the barbarians raging and stuff. But that's all I got out of it.
So I said, the way he transforms is pretty brutal, and I was just wondering, the way I described it to you, where his muscles are bulging, his guts are spilling out of him somehow, and his lungs are hanging out of him, his eyes are hanging out of him. What does that kind of tell you about the brutality of war and how they kind of celebrate it in this story?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was I think war was, especially like close combat war, was a lot more common back then. Like you fought those large battles with hundreds of people on a field killing each other. So it's
in a pretty brutal fashion too. Yeah. I mean, you swipe a sword at someone and you get them in the guts and they start spilling out. That's
there's a lower regard for human life. There's a lot of it's brutal. It's terrifying to think about, really.
Yeah, for especially for us who don't live that day to day or every battle season.
Yeah, we're sitting in a cozy living room by a fireplace, and it's like, oh, this is nice. This is great. I could live.
This is so tough. It's 40 degrees outside. How can we record this without a fire?
And like back then, it's like, yeah, it was 40 degrees outside. I know that because I was sitting outside. We ran out of wood. Ran out of wood for the fire, but luckily I was mauled to death by a bear.
And the last question here I got is why Cu Cullainn spared Queen Maeve. We covered that. The big question, Alex: how does the Tain compare to other great epics around the world, and what makes this story unique?
Well, my favorite epic has always been Epic of Gilgamesh. I just like that. It's like the oldest known story. It's got this cool background where they found like 12 of the 15 tablets, and like 3 of them were destroyed. And there's this whole cool history. Beowulf's a lot of fun. Iliad, Odyssey are great. And obviously, this one's a lot less known. I think it's still definitely important, especially for Irish history. Like I don't want to speak for all of Ireland, but they seem to really enjoy their history and their lineage in that country. So I think it's important to have stories like this. So I'd say it ranks up there. I would like to see another translation that gives it a little more modern flair, increases its accessibility to the rest of the world, so we can get a better understanding of these ancient people in their times.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this story compared a lot to Hercules, the Iliad, as Cu Cullainn being more of a Achilles character.
Yeah, I was getting Achilles vibes.
Yeah, you get back and forth between the two. I think just because like Hercules' brute strength with Cu Cullainn's brute strength of just unbeatability, so he doesn't die in this story, but Cu Cullainn does die young, in battle in a kind of a weird way, and kind of like Achilles does, and he's kind of destined to have that same, oh, you're going to live forever, but you're going to die young kind of thing. So the Finian cycle, or the Finn McCool, that's kind of always been more, even though they came after, but more popular, the King Arthur stories related to those. But so a lot of the tropes of these kinds of stories are still there, of the epic battles of with no real detail, just we killed many people over and over and over again. So it's, you can see that from Norse to Greek to basically any of these stories where it's just massive killing, and then you get a bit of this is what life was outside the battle, between foster brothers or bonded warriors. Or
yeah, and like I'm not saying like a lot of those epics are huge page turners. Like even Beowulf, like most of the story is them sitting around a dining hall, like bragging and talking and eating dinner, and then like there's a couple pages where he rips a dude's arm off and kills his mother.
Yeah, one thing I heard, I forget where, a lot of times these stories, people read them for the battle scenes, but when you actually look at the original translations, it's more about how to conduct yourself in life. And the battles were to get the gripping, you get people's attention, to be gripping, but it was more of a, no, this is how you properly live your life, how you treat your women, how you eat, how you...
Yeah, it's like a morality tale. Like It's like the suitors at the end of the Odyssey. Spoilers if you haven't read the Odyssey. You've had 2,000 years, but they are breaking all kinds of codes of chivalry. They're being really poor house guests. They're trying to get with a married woman, and what happens? They get mercilessly slaughtered when Odysseus gets home. It's a morality tale. Like, be good or we kill you.
Yeah. What I thought made this story more unique was kind of how the gods interacted. We only hear of really two of the gods by name, and while the Morrigan definitely had a large role, and Lear had a large role in healing Cu Cullainn, they weren't really involved with it. Like, you look at Norse mythology or Greek mythology, a lot of these battles started because the gods were bored and like, let's stir things up and see what happens. This one was the people were doing all the stirring up, and the gods just kind of stepped in and said, okay, we're cheering for you, here's a help, but it's still on you in the end.
Yeah, a lot more ownership over their actions.
And I know a lot of Irish myth, especially the gods, there's a lot of hot debate whether the gods were just warriors like Cu Cullainn, who then went to god status because retelling after retelling after retelling for hundreds or thousands of years put these people up on this pedestal, and it's like, yeah, they were just kings and queens and warriors also. They've become immortal through story, and therefore they've made god status. They're not really truly like what we would call a god, or what the Norse would call a god, or the Greeks would call a god, or these immortal beings from another plane. Even though they said they were, the Tuatha De Danann, or live on another plane, but they were on the mortal plane to begin with, and they had their own tribe on Ireland before they were kicked out, kind of thing. So it's just a slightly different way, where it says the gods are there, but they don't dominate life. They're not deciding battles or starting battles. But yeah, that is the Tain. Alex, you have any final comments?
Yeah, good book. Give it a try.
How many stars?
I didn't rate it on Goodreads. I don't know. I'd probably give it like 3 or 4.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
It's more of a begrudging 4, but I'll give it 3. Cause,
it's a solid 3.
I liked it more than I hated it.
It's a solid 3, but the story is a 4 if you had a better teller of the story, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ciaran Carson's dead, so we can make fun of it all we want. No one will get offended. So.
But yeah, it's a good book. It's definitely a good, maybe not introduction into Irish myth, maybe listen to, like I said, the different podcasts that get into it. It'll be a little bit easier to learn a little bit more of the backstory.
Yeah, almost every epic you read, you probably want a little backstory of the history and the times before you start reading it. Otherwise, you're going to be totally lost.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the story.
Amazing.
Yeah. That's that. Alex, you got the next pick, don't you?
I do have the next pick. So we're going to go with a modern writer, but with an old story.
Again?
Again.
I think you're just copying what I do just to annoy the fans.
So I was excited for this author. It's one of my favorite authors of all time, I would say. This is one of her lesser-known stories. She's a Canadian author, probably best known. She was the first person to ever win a Bram Stoker Award, I believe.
First person ever, or first woman ever?
First person ever. Let me pause real quick and double check that. It was the first book to ever win the Arthur C. Clarke Award. Excuse me. Yeah. So yeah,
she's. I thought that Bram Stoker Award was a little bit older than she'd been alive, maybe, but
that makes sense. Her book, The Handmaid's Tale, won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, 1987's first book to ever do so. However, we're not reading Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale. We are reading a different book by her. It is a retelling of the Odyssey. Speaking of epics,
through
the eyes of Odysseus' wife Penelope. This book is called The Penelopiad.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge Margaret Atwood fan. This is going to be good. I've read this one before. I pounded the book out in a day.
It's another short read.
It's a short read.
A little bit easier.
I'm going to take my time with it, though. Hopefully pull a little bit more out than as a speed reading. I'm like, this is great. But we're going to have a lot to talk about with that. Yeah. Margaret If you're a big fan of like gender studies, Margaret Atwood's your girl. Hopefully, two white dudes don't totally butcher that, but we'll do our best.
Oh, I'm hoping to totally butcher that. That's my goal, is to be a total dingleberry here.
I'm a real ding dong, guys.
Favorite Margaret Atwood book? Quick.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna go with The Blind Assassin.
Okay.
It's either that or Oryx and Crake. I really liked Oryx.
What was the second one called? Year of the Flood. Yeah, that's my favorite.
That was you? Okay. Yeah. And Handmaid's Tale is also really good. Those are probably my top three. But
Handmaid's Tale, way better in book form. Though season 1 of the show is, since it basically follows the book, it's good. After that, it kind of loses me.
Yeah, I gotta say the follow-up, The Testaments, that came out.
That was.
It was a letdown.
That was. I don't blame her, because hey, show is selling, so pump out that book to make your money. But it definitely did not fit the original, the actual her written story. It was basically a spinoff for the show.
Yeah, it was definitely. It was also like. We can talk more about this next time if we ever bring in Handmaid's Tale. But it was essentially gifted the Booker Prize, which is like the biggest prize in literature you can win. It like came out and they're immediately like, it's like, we already have a Booker Prize winner, but you're gonna win a second Booker Prize for this book. So it was a weird situation. But I might get more into that, because that irked me. But it's a decent book. But
yeah, I'm sure we'll have more Margaret Atwood on this podcast in the future, anyways.
Yeah, we're both Margaret Atwood guys.
Yeah, we enjoy her work. I mean, you'd have to be a piece of petrified wood not to enjoy her. I mean,
it's so well done. It's like action packed. It's got these cool like gender studies and cool dynamics between characters. So I really like the Penelopiad. She has a really great twist on that story. So it'll be good.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to it. So make sure you check in, where that'll be on the 5th of next month. We also have our bonus episodes on the 20th of every month. Please subscribe and get any notifications you can on whatever podcast you listen to make sure you don't miss an episode. We have a Facebook group page. You can join on that. We have an Instagram that we're a little bit more active on, so check out that.
Joe's a little more active on.
Yeah, I am. Alex does none of this. Maybe Haley will start taking over social media. She seemed excited about that.
That'd be cool if she could get us doing some recording, action shots of us.
Yeah, there you go.
See me and my wrapped up in my blanket here.
Yeah, it's got the heat cranked up and Alex is still cold. We have YouTube, though I recently realized there's been some problems where YouTube does not upload it at the same time as everything else, so please bear with us if that's how you like to listen. I am trying to figure out what's going on with that. I have no clue. If someone has any thoughts on how to fix this, it's something with the upload from Podbean. We are on Podbean. That's our host of the show. What else do we have? We have an email, kindlebookworms@gmail.com. You can email me there. You can email me through the DMs on Instagram if you have any thoughts or requests. We read everything and then quickly forget about it. So please interact. We enjoy the interactions with our fans. We also on Spotify, I'll often put up questions or polls. So please comment or fill out the polls there. We enjoy the interactions there too.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Alex has some books for sale.
Yeah, we got Paul Plimpton versus Ragnarok, and the recently re-released The Destroyer, which came out at the end of last month. So I'm super excited to have that back out again.
Yeah,
It
Alex
looks
is having
great.
to think about that because at the time of recording, it's not last month and has not been released yet. So
It's looking great though.
yeah, he will get it out on time because, well, you'll find out in this last bonus episode why this was important.
It's literally like ready to go. It's got to hit publish and then it's done.
So yeah, Alex, you got anything else for
That's
us?
all I got.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, that was the Tain. Tune in next time for the Penelopiad. And until next time, I'm Alex.
And Joe.
And this has been Bookworms.